we're on a schedule. We want to make sure we get out for the World Peace Prayer ceremony at 2:15. So I would like to now introduce Bill Douglas, who will be our speaker today. He has his bachelor's degree in history and religion from Sterling College, and he also attended Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary and Mary Knowles School of Mission, and then he got an MA in history from the U of I. And he has an interesting collection of jobs, which I guess shows if you major in religion that maybe you won't always get a job in your field. Anyway, he's been a TA, a teaching assistant. He's been a political organizer. He's been a fundraiser, although that was with Iowa Quest for Peace, which is cool. He's been the director of Criminal Justice Ministries of Iowa, and he's done delivery work. And I'm sort of assuming you're retired now. Is that correct? Okay. And then he also has many publications and conference presentations on the topic of religious history in Iowa and conscientious objection. So please join me in welcoming Bill.
Well, I know I can only scratch the surface today, and fortunately there's a clock, but somebody, if I don't get up to past 1857 by 2 o'clock, please let me know. And I want to start off with a couple of epigrams. One's really not on the topic, but it's related in terms of Iowa. This person says, "I do not think there was ever a more wicked war than that waged by the United States against Mexico. I thought so at the time when I was a youngster, only I had not moral courage enough to resign." And what makes this such an interesting quote is by Ulysses S. Grant. And I just happened to see that when I was trying to see if I could get back past 1857 on anything with Iowa and peace, and I didn't. So I'll say, another epigram. I'm disorganized already. And this is by William Stafford, who was a World War II conscientious objector. And I just found this out. You probably knew this, David. That he got his PhD from Iowa, and is one of several poets who come out of the civilian public service camps of World War II. William Emerson is another one, and he had an extensive correspondence with Iowa novelist Rusuko, who spent several weeks, I think a month, teaching writing, traveling around to CPS camps during World War II. And I'm going to give you a quote. I wasn't sure which one I wanted to do, but I'll go with the second stanza of this 5 a.m. poem, is the title. "There are people in every country who never turn into killers. Saints have built sanctuaries on islands and in valleys. Conquerors have quit and gone home. For thousands of years, farmers have worked their fields." And so if I don't get to World War II, that's your World War II part. But I do want to go back to 1857. And I'm not sure if Iowa was the only state to have this in their constitution, but in their new 1857 constitution, there's this, Article 6, Section 2, says, "No person or persons conscientiously scrupulous of bearing arms shall be compelled to do military duty in time of peace, provided that such person or persons shall pay an equivalent for such exemptions in the same manner as other citizens." Now, is there a lawyer in the House? If I see here that the loophole in this, it does say in times of peace. So this was never litigated apparently, but still on the books. And Quakers and Mennonites and the Amana Colony, the Society of True Inspiration, and the Church of the Brethren, And separately, the Seventh-day Adventists all petitioned the Iowa legislature for exemptions under this, and with the loophole during the Civil War, and with the loophole, they were not. The legislature rejected it, and that's about all I know about Civil War conscientious objection. It was pretty easy, at least in the North, to get out, and there's some indication that, at least among Mennonites, there was a collective, they worked collectively to make sure that they could raise money to basically buy people out of the draft. And the only other thing that I found, and I'm sure that there's a lot of more work to do, on the Civil War, is that the Seventh-day Adventists, of course, were a new denomination. The war just ended in 1844, I remember, and so it was a fairly new denomination, but it did have pacifist roots, and there was some disagreement between the Iowa Adventists and the national leadership of Ellen White. And the Iowa Adventists wanted to go further and make a stronger stand against the war and for conscientious objection. Ellen White was a little bit nervous about making such a public stand. And taking this forward, the Seventh-day Adventists are, well, by World War II, they were still conscientious objectors, but they prefer to call it conscientious cooperators, and worked within the military system in non-combatant roles. Just, we're doing on time. Just a few things about the latter part of the 19th century. I want to spend most of my time on World War I and Camp Dodge, because that's what I know most about. But during the 1870s, there was a local chapter in Mount Pleasant of the Universal Peace Union. And I found some evidence that well, at least one Iowan came out against the war of 1898 against Spain. That was George Augustus Gates, the president of, well, it's now Grinnell College. It was called Iowa College back then. And during World War, as the United States enters World War I in April 6, 1917, and there's little preparation either among objectors to war or the War Department or the government about what to do about conscientious objectors. And there's basically a rush to establish the selective service system. But within 2 months, there was draft registration on June 5th, 1917. There are small pockets of public resistance to the draft and refusal to sign up. Most notably in Iowa, in the coal camps south of Centerville. There are like 40 mostly Italian, apparently anarchist-influenced miners who refused to register for the draft, and they were arrested, taken to Ottumwa, taken to Des Moines, eventually bailed out by their neighbors, and apparently most of them are eventually persuaded to register. Not all of them. The way it worked in World War I was that if you were an alien who hadn't taken steps towards citizenship, that you were still required, if you were a male between 21 and 30, to register, but you weren't actually eligible for the draft. But two of the coal miners still refused to draft. They spend a year in county jail in Centerville, and then they're deported after their sentence. And I want to spend most of my time dealing with what happened at Camp Dodge. But let's mention a couple other things that were going on at the same time. Camp Dodge was originally set up to take men from the central third of Illinois, Iowa, North Dakota, and Minnesota. But pretty soon after the draft gets going, they start switching back and forth, and people most notably black people from Alabama are sent to Camp Dodge because the War Department they'll still be segregated in Camp Dodge, but the War Department does not want to train black and white troops in the South together at all. And then there'll be people from South Dakota, Nebraska, Montana by the end of the war, as there's 40,000 people will be drafted per and then trained, several months of training, and then they and their officers get shipped over to Europe. And so during all this time, as we'll see, the War Department still hasn't figured out what to do about conscientious objectors. So some of them actually get people who've been drafted and come first to the camp on September 15th. They've basically gotten seniority by the time the War Department figures out finally what to do with them in June. But let me just mention a couple of other places where Iowans were. The Amana colonies, their draft eligible men first got a farm deferment. And so they were not, but that caused such a furor among the other residents of Iowa County that eventually Selective Service reverses that, and they're sent in mass in, I think, summer of 1918. And there's actually a picture that I think is them. They're all sent to Camp Pike in Arkansas. And there's also a Quaker, Arthur Standing, an Iowa Quaker, who's written a memoir. It's mostly his letters home that his daughter has edited. And he ends up at Camp Gordon before going on to the Friends Reconstruction Unit overseas. Well, at least I got to the 20th century. The person I want to spend, who I think is illustrative, and I want to spend most of the time on, is a guy named Roy Buchanan, who was at Camp Dodge from September of 1917 all the way till August of 1918, July or August. And he was a Mennonite. He is from central Illinois, from Metamora, but his particular problem was that he was not a birthright Mennonite, and in fact, he had only joined the Mennonite church after the war started. And that made him automatically suspicious to the authorities. They didn't know why he would want to join the Mennonite church at such an opportune time if he just didn't want to get out of service. Actually, he had lived and worked with a Mennonite family for 6 years on a farm in central Illinois, and he gradually became convinced of Mennonite principles, except that the principle that he had the hardest time with was non-resistance, or refusing to fight in the war. But eventually he does join the Mennonite church just in time to register for the draft, and then get drafted and sent to Camp Dodge with 40,000 other people, most of whom do not have any scruples about going to fight. And Roy Buchanan's story is a struggle of conscience. He's committed not to fight. He doesn't want to do any work that he thinks would otherwise be, would relieve a soldier from his duties, and he also refuses to wear the uniform. And there's a uniform, the whole question of work and whether one was willing to drill. Those are the three issues that are constantly battled back and forth between the military authorities, who don't really have a clear idea of what they're supposed to do with conscientious objectors, and the objectors themselves, who oftentimes do not have a clear idea of what they should be doing and what their church wants them to do. So Roy Buchanan eventually he and most of the other Mennonite, it's Mennonite and a few Brethren objectors are eventually sent to by October, I believe, they're sent to the remount depot, which is considered non-combatant by the Camp Dodge authorities. The remount depot was actually under the control of the regular army rather than the drafted army, and was in charge of buying and sorting out horses and mules for use in the military. And at first, they don't, the objectors, including Buchanan, don't have any specific assignments. Gradually, the authorities try and get them to do more and more work. And pretty soon, Buchanan and one other person, Eli Saltzman, realized that what they're doing is just basically substituting for another soldier. And they said, they went to their authorities and said, we can't do this, we can't work in place of a soldier. And the authorities really don't know what to do either, and so they try kindness, they try threats, and basically from November until June, Buchanan and the other absolutist objectors are put in this position. Sometimes they're in the guardhouse. Then when that doesn't seem to work, they're brought back. When they first get to the guardhouse, I don't know if you remember the 1960s comedy western by James Garner, Support Your Local Sheriff. The jail there is so new that they don't have bars in yet, and so they are able to at least get some amusement about just watching the construction workers put in the bars for them. And pretty soon another Mennonite objector joins them in the guardhouse, and then three more. And the authorities realize that this isn't working very well, and they say, okay, we're no longer going to feed you. We'll give you food, but you've got to cook it by yourselves outside. And this is where the title of the talk is, that non-cooperation requires cooperation. They managed to figure out a way to get the brush, make the fire, cook the raw ingredients that the mess has given to them, and thus able to eat. And then the authorities say, well, now you're going to have to do it within an hour. And of course, they have to cooperate even more. And eventually, the authorities kind of relent and take them out of the guardhouse for a while. Then there's an incident in Henry County, in Wayland, where some local, I'm not sure if we can call them officials, but they're members of the the Iowa Council for National Defense, which is kind of a quasi-official unit of loyalty enforcement. And they have a bunch of Mennonites in their community, and they decided that they're going to put pressure on local congregations and local ministers to pressure the Camp Dodge objectors to relent in their absolute stand. And so they actually physically force one of the bishops to sign a statement saying that they should that the objectors should give up their stand. This is pretty shocking to the guys that were local to Mount Pleasant. But eventually they all refuse, and the cycle goes over again. Finally, in April, the War Department issues what it says is its final decision about what to do about absolute objectors. The peace churches object to this, and on June 1st there's another final order, and a board of inquiry is set up. It's supposed to go across, a three-member board of inquiry is set up. It's supposed to go across the country and interview objectors to see if they're really sincere. And it's pretty clear to the board that, although the board gets bored, they find it tedious to go through all these Mennonites. So when they're political objectors, they find that a little bit more interesting. But it's also clear that there's a pretty high degree of sincerity. And finally, in July, most of the objectors who were there then are approved for either farm furloughs or for reconstruction work in Europe. However, because Roy Buchanan was such a latecomer to the Mennonite Church, they're not sure what to do with him. So he gets sent to Fort Leavenworth for another round of questioning. And he actually is assigned to kind of shepherd the other dozen or so objectors to Leavenworth. And where he is actually judged sincere, and then he gets to go to first for training, and then to the Friends Reconstruction Unit in Europe. How much time do I have left? Where? 10 more minutes? Okay. I mean, obviously I could go on for hours just on Camp Dodge, but you'd all leave. So. Let me just really briefly summarize what happened in the 1940s. Both the government and the peace churches and other objectors were much better prepared, given the situation, the lack of preparedness during World War I, plus the fact that there had been a peacetime draft starting in 1940. And actually, at least one Iowan, James Ball, who's a Quaker from Des Moines, refused to register and was sentenced to the maximum one-year sentence, and actually gets out of prison before the United States enters World War II. But the concept for that most conscientious objectors agreed to during World War II involves the civilian concept, the civilian public service camps, or CPS camps. One of the earliest ones is out in Denison. It was a converted CCC camp run by Mennonites. There was a dairy farm somehow associated with Iowa State in Ames that the Friends ran. And one thing that's different about the composition of objectors during World War II as opposed to World War I is there are a lot more mainline Protestant objectors. There were almost none in World War I. And so there are actually 3 of the 4 mental health institutes also accept objectors and function as CPS camps. The Mount Pleasant one was first run by Mennonites, and then the only evangelical and reformed CPS camp in the country was at Independence. That's one of the German forerunners of the UCC. And one of only 2 Methodist CPS camps was the mental health unit in Cherokee. And just to say one more word about that, it was the witnessing of the and documenting by the objectors in those mental health institutions was foundational in the reform of mental health, the whole mental health system in Iowa after World War II. And you actually have a decline in the population as a result of the new policies. I think I'll cut it off there because time is short. But I'd be glad to answer any questions or entertain debate. Yes?
I have a particular interest in Camp Dodge
Yeah.
because I had an uncle who lived there.
Okay.
He actually gave me some information about it one time.
Okay,
Forrest
yeah.
Rockwell.
Yeah.
And the stories came down to us through the family that he had been very much traumatized, tortured. They said they would stick a gun to his head and say he deserved to live, throw him in the latrine and urinate on him, things like that. And I've always wondered, I think I've always kind of assumed it was probably the other soldiers there that would be doing that, but I wonder if you know.
Yeah, it was some of each, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a real deterioration of conditions for objectors, basically starting in July 1918. It may have to do with new people at the top. It may have to do with the influence of military intelligence, which was by midsummer 1918 was basically running or supervising the objectors. A lot of the instances of violence are soldier against objector. And that didn't seem to be true earlier in the war, and I'm not sure why. There was a triple hanging of African American soldiers in July 4th or 5th, that everyone in the camp was forced to witness, and I think that had some effect on the level, it raised the level of violence too. It's hard to measure, but did that help answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I'm curious as to why you chose Roy Buchanan as someone to detail on. And, well, I guess I got a number of questions. That's one. Secondly, you started off by wondering whether you'd even get past 1857, and you seem to jump from 1850s to World War I and World War II pretty fast.
Yeah.
But you also seem to make a distinction between conscientious objectors that are religious objectors and political objectors that may not be defensible in all cases.
And they were treated very differently.
Pardon?
They were treated very differently.
Yeah, but the Supreme Court is supposed to look at your beliefs and not how
Oh,
you're
yeah,
treated.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean,
But also, I guess the last and major question is, how did the institutional religious bodies of these objectors react to their objections?
react to
Their objection.
Their
whose
objections.
objections?
I assume that there were not every member of the religious body was in Camp Dodge from Iowa. There were a lot of
Right.
people who
Right.
maybe went into the war or whatnot.
Yeah.
How did this change, or what kind of effect did it have on the religious hierarchies?
Okay. To take the first question, well, that wasn't the first question. Why Roy Buchanan? He wrote a very good memoir that's not very easily accessible. And the fact that he was there for such a long time also, you know, helps illustrate, I think, the conditions of more than just him. But yeah, I could have chosen other people, and I actually have documented about 535 objectors of like 20 different political or religious organizations, and the stories will all be different. In terms of political or religious, the socialists, most of them tended to be draft resistors, so they come to Camp Dodge already incarcerated in effect, and they're told to put on the uniform. They refuse, and they're immediately court-martialed in most cases and sent to Leavenworth in most cases. Whereas the religious objectors, the War Department has not figured out what to do with them. Now, there is a lot of, in terms of the institutional support, there was a lot of institutional support, especially among Mennonites. Aaron Laux was the national liaison, and he comes to Camp Dodge repeatedly. And he works with Sanford Yoder, who's from Kelowna, who also visits Camp Dodge a lot. The strategy of the military, and sometimes it was effective, was basically to isolate the objectors. And there were probably a lot of objectors who came in with the intention of being conscious objectors, and they just got lost in the system and end up serving in, well, the military really didn't mind if they were non-combatants. That was basically okay. But there's not a very good record of who was non-combatant and who wasn't. But just to go back to Roy Buchanan for 1 minute, he actually had a document from his draft board saying this person is a religious objector. He gave it to his commanding officer, and he never saw it again. Did that help answer your question?
Sure.
And I guess I was being facetious when I said we would do it until the 20th century. It's one of my many faults. Yeah.
So I had a question. In your dovetail article, you mentioned that there were some Pentecostalists who were objectors in World War I, and I was just curious why that was, or if you know anything more about that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because there were both Assembly of God and Church of God in Christ objectors that I can document that were at Camp Dodge during World War I. And early Pentecostalism had a pacifist streak in it. There's several books on it. There's a little bit in it in this book, but a guy named Alexander writes about war, peace to war, and it was a very speedy move among Pentecostals away from pacifism and toward support for the military. I think I found one Pentecostal from Marshalltown who's still an objector, or who was an objector to World War II, but it gets very rare. And then on the other hand, there's almost no mainline Protestants who were objectors in World War I, and they're fairly common in World War II.
We could probably take one more question if anyone has a question.
Yes.
Just wondering, in World War II, did the Methodists, I assume the ME North and the Evangelical Reform, did they disavow their conscious objectors or provide any support for them? You talked about
They did, yeah, the issue is particularly interesting in Iowa because, well, yeah, before World War II, it's actually on the books that we are a pacifist organization.
for the Methodists?
For the Methodists, yeah, at least in Iowa. That very quickly changes once Pearl Harbor happens. But there's a struggle. There's a prominent Methodist pastor in Ames, Collegiate. I'm not going to remember his name, but he remains a pacifist during World War, during the whole war. And actually, he's pretty well accepted by the ROTC folks on campus. They flock to his services because he's such a good preacher, I guess.
And what about the Evangelical Reform? Were they, the pre-UCC people, were they officially pacifists?
No, but they did support the right of conscience objection. I think most, at least northern mainline Protestant churches did. And the reason that, just to be frank, the reason the Methodists and Evangelical Reform churches sponsored the CPS camps and mental health institutes was because it was easy to do it on the cheap. They didn't have to run the camp because it was already institutional. They were already doing that. So. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. That was very interesting, and we are appreciative that you came all the way from Des Moines to enlighten us about this. So now we're going to move to the pedestrian mall, and there will be kind of a brief commemoration of conscientious objectors, and then we'll do the World Peace Prayer ceremony. And there are chairs set up out there. So thank you for coming, and we'll see you outside.